With EV sales tanking, internal combustion engines failing, and with the overall consumer looking for different choices in affordability, means that we're going to see some massive price drops by these 5 brands. Let's get into it now. Life's too short to drive boring cars. And the first manufacturer to see a major price drop in the spring of 2026 is likely to be Ford, and there's a few good reasons for it. First of all, they're trying to address affordability. They came out with this vehicle here. This is the little Maverick, one of the most affordable little pickup trucks. These sales are starting to drop, and unfortunately, Ford's looking for newfound ways to sell some of their inventory. While Ford has some of the best-selling internal combustion engine trucks on the market, splitting hairs with General Motors and Chevy, Ford has done an amazing job selling a lot of their full-size trucks. The problem is the F-150 Lightning, according to Farley, is going to get the hatchet. They're not going to sell them anymore because they're not selling, and each one took massive incentives to sell. And while there's a lot of this truck inventory on the lots, the vast majority of the internal combustion vehicles, the 2.7s, the 3 liters, even the 3.5s are likely going to sell. They move them quite well. The metal just keeps going. Now, the full-size Super Duty trucks haven't been selling all that well, with the exception of the F450, which seems to be hard to find these days. The fact is, Ford's recognizing that the EV market is not one that they can compete in right now. And while they have the Mustang Mach-E like this right now on full charge, it's just going to beat the drum. Of course, these are popular, but they've had to incentivize these very aggressively. Now, I've seen these vehicles marked down as much as $20,000, $25,000 because they're not selling. Pure EVs is something that Ford's recognized, very difficult to compete with BYDs in the Chinese market. And when that door gets kicked in, guaranteed Ford's going to struggle like every other manufacturer competing with China. So Farley's recognized that to sell these EVs, they're going to have to incorporate something that's more hybrid, something that's partial, an extended range, an EREV versus a full-on electric vehicle. Means that Ford's looking more adopting more of the hybrid or EREV generation of vehicles rather than creating something that is pure electric. Because most truck owners have spoken loudly, and it's clearly, well, trucks like this, the F-150 Tremor or Lariat or any of those gas jobs is what the customers who are driving pickup trucks actually want. Farley's recognized that they're going to start cutting back on the sales of full-on large trucks, large SUVs that are going to be electrified. While there might be a variation of some sort of hybrid or extended range electric vehicle, the idea of creating a larger vehicle that needs twice as many batteries and bigger motors just doesn't seem to fit the bill. Customers aren't buying it. With the heavy incentives means that Ford plans to lose money, and as a result, what we're starting to see is anything that's currently EV is likely to see a massive discount in the spring of 26. And with the recalls that they've seen on some of their smaller engines, like the Escape 3 cylinders, and as well as the Bronco Sport 3 cylinders, they've had those injector issues. A lot of these vehicles are selling, they're popular, but the idea of these might be getting scaled back as well. And Ford's really looking at dialing in the affordability issue. Not so much for the consumer like you and I. They have to sell products that are competitive. And if they're not competitive, then they're not going to sell it and they're not going to stay in business. See, because there was a time when you wouldn't see one of these Broncos on the lot. But look, the whole lot is full of these vehicles and nobody's buying them. They're just sitting here piling up on the lot. Now, a lot of these vehicles, Big Bend and Raptors and everything in between, means that there's lots of choice. Ford's got to get back. We've seen big changes in the last year or so, and now Ford is realizing they have to sell things that are more affordable. The cost of living crisis is real and it's taking people by storm. And of course, with the federal tax credit waving bye-bye, they realize it's going to be a much harder uphill battle to try to sell anything EV. That's why they're making the F-150 Lightning go away. That's why the Mustang Mach-E is highly incentivized. They're not selling. So that's why Ford's getting back to simpler, lower cost, and affordable.
Once Stellantis has basically collapsed, we're not talking about free cash flows, we're not talking about long-term EV strategy, we're not talking about market position.
Shares have fallen by more than half. As a result of the disappointing US sales, profits have fallen by nearly 50%.
With a massive amount of inventory still sitting on a lot of these lots, it's no surprise that Jeep is one of those manufacturers that we're going to see some big decreases in pricing in the spring of 2026. Because as they say, what goes up must go down. And Jeep's been one of those manufacturers that have escalated their prices abnormally high in the last few years. They took advantages of shortages across the industry and priced their vehicles extraordinarily high. The base Laredo Jeep Grand Cherokee is up about $9,000 from what it was 10 years ago, meaning that's about a 30% increase in 10 years, where the core inflation is only 3 to 4% year over year. And the Wrangler, one of the most popular models in the Jeep space, have seen some huge increases in their prices too. Of course, now the transformation with the 4xEs and the electrification means that the creation of the research and development to manufacture those absolutely got tacked onto the price of every vehicle, including the base internal combustion vehicles. Like this base little Jeep Wrangler, you get a hard top and all kinds of great detailing here. If you want to step into the hybrid version of this, could cost you as much as $80,000 or $90,000, with the 392 version and the V8 SRT costing well over and cresting six figures. On top of it, the Wagoneer and Wagoneer S have crested 100,000 as well, and that far exceeds what the average consumer is expecting from a Jeep, an affordable all-terrain vehicle, but it's gone way into the luxury car space. And this here's a classic example of why they're not selling right now, and why in fact in the spring of 2026 we're going to see a massive decrease. Right here we have this great little Jeep Grand Cherokee, beautiful, dressed in black. Yes, you get sunroof on the top and you get all kinds of nice detailing, but you also happen to get a price tag of $78,000 and change. And by the time you put in the extras, PPF and the taxes, you're well over $80,000 or $85,000 out the door for this vehicle. So it's not a surprise when a lot of people look at the price escalations of these Jeeps. What has happened to the brand? They've got extraordinarily expensive, and to the point where it's very, very difficult to afford these new Jeeps. Granted, this one's fairly high level spec and trim. A lot of these vehicles are far more than the customers bargained for, and Jeep's going to take a look at this. Stellantis is realizing to sell these vehicles and move metal, they're going to have to readjust their pricing. The worst part is the 4xe versions, the plug-in hybrids, along with the Wranglers, have had an exclusive amount of issues with electronics, battery failures, and recalls beyond recalls, including the over-the-air update. Means that a lot of customers are losing the confidence in the brand, because here we have one that's even more expensive. Would you believe? $92,000 for this version. And this is a Summit Reserve. Granted, it's beautiful. You get the laser cut wheels on here, beautiful two-tone handles. It's a gorgeous unit. But now you're at $100,000 out the door for Jeep Grand Cherokee. They say when you want to climb the Mount Everest summit, you need hundreds of thousands of dollars to do it. Well, this is the same thing. You need hundreds of thousands of dollars to purchase one of these vehicles, sadly enough. And for consumers to continually come into the door and pick these vehicles up, they're going to need a little bit more motivation. And likely Jeep, because of their increases in their prices, they're likely going to make some huge adjustments in the year 2026. And if you want to see what some of the best cars available out there, some of the cars that I love, join the membership program today. Get it while it's hot. You're going to love it. You're going to see everything that makes me tick. The next brand likely to see some big discounts here in the spring of 26, Tesla. That's right, because of the flood of returns, the flood of those vehicles coming from Hertz, because of all of the excess inventory, because of the fact that people are buying used, because of heavy depreciation, because of the cost increases, and of course because of the federal tax credits gone bye-bye. That's right, a lot of these vehicles here of course have been popular for the last few years, and people have wanted to get on the bandwagon, but the problem is they're very expensive, and the sign of the times right now, people are looking for more affordable options. And just like Farley over at Ford said, you know, they're looking at getting rid of some of the larger, more expensive EVs and going with something smaller and hybrid, because that's what the flavor's at and that's what the consumer is expecting. Now there's always going to be Tesla fanboys, but these vehicles are very, very expensive. So if you want a Tesla, you're going to have to buy it. You're going to have to pay for that. But the bottom line is they're going to come with a cost, and people looking for that Tesla will pay it. However, there's less and less and less people buying, and many would buy or use, even with some of the quality control issues. Of course, a lot of times they're talking about paint problems, electric issues. The center control screen there has had problems as well with some of these vehicles, icing up on the door handles. Of course, the range anxiety, and when you're getting into the snowy, cold weather, it becomes a real problem. While the vehicles don't get maybe half of the range that they might have, but they're just not necessarily getting the range that a lot of people would expect. And unfortunately, driving a Tesla these days seems to be proving itself out to be less and less practical in the cold climates. There's even changes in California where they have a Tesla dealer on every corner, and less acceptance of a lot of the Tesla product even in California means that there's going to be likely less sales with no federal incentives means that more and more people are likely just going to default and buy something else. With quality control issues, Cybertruck's not selling, and those vehicles literally becoming piles in some of those storage units, and Tesla's going to be looking for a lot of opportunities to sell their products to anybody who's listening. There's going to be a great market opportunity for those wanting to buy a Tesla, because likely in the spring of 26 you're going to start seeing some huge discounts on the brand. Massive price drops come from one major thing: poor sales. And nobody knows poor sales as badly as Jaguar. And we're looking at an SVR version, top spec, top trim level, and one of the most exciting SUVs you'll find on the market. The problem is this is the last model that Jaguar's actually got available for sale, pretty much next to the I-Pace. Now you look at these vehicles, everybody loves the way these look. They sound great. The F-Pace, which which is this model right here, gives you the snarling exhaust tips, and the SVR means that you're getting the supercharged 5-liter V8 with 550 horsepower, ZF 8-speed automatic. It's reliable, it's fast, it's furious, and it sounds amazing, but nobody's buying them. Why? Well, it's a branding issue, and Jaguar has struggled in the last few years. Of course, they've been trying to rebrand them. Now, of course, we're seeing all kinds of shifting in management, and design is absolutely gone upside down. Their new model they're trying to come out, well, that hasn't been the best seller, but rebranding with all those flashy colors that Jaguar has been producing means that a lot of people have got put off by the brand. Overall, they look at the brand now and said, you know what, I've had enough. Jaguar has been declining in sales since about 2018, 2019. Their sales have been dropping off a cliff. They had some amazing cars, XJRs, XJs. You think about the F-Types and E-Pace, F-Pace. Well, guess what? They're pretty much all gone except for the F-Pace. And even these, they don't produce them anymore. It's what's outstanding on the car lots like this. It's all you're going to find. And because now of this rebrand and the poor sales combined with the efforts to try to stay afloat with new management, of course, the F-Paces are the only thing keeping them moving right now. And unfortunately, with that said, they're going to try to sell everything in the spring of what's outstanding. We see new old stock still available. And if you look at some of the poorest sellers, Jaguar is definitely leading the charge. The I-Pace, it's EV, and we know that EV sales are taking a tank. So Jaguar, as it stands, really only have one model left to even consider, and even this one's not selling. So regardless of they have 0 to 60 in 3.5 seconds, room here for 5 passengers, comfortable, as well as big, glorious brakes and massive tires and details that absolutely make this thing stand out, is just not enough. Nobody's buying these. And with no models to choose from, can you blame the customer? They're looking for something new and fresh. And unfortunately, the F-Pace has been around for many, many years now. It's getting long in the tooth. And even with the fresh reface they did and slight updates in the interior, that wasn't enough to really dig them out of the hole. Nobody's buying the F-Pace. Unfortunately for Jaguar, it could mean very close to the end. For a consumer, there's usually years left of inventory for parts, and there's a lot of those small independent shops available. It looks to be that their service network still plans to stay in business for a while, so it doesn't appear that there's any real significant risk in that regard. But as far as it goes, sales are not amazing. Jaguar is struggling, and if you're looking for a massive deal on one of the most glamorous and impressive SUVs, definitely Jaguar has you covered. The next brand that's likely going to be dropping prices, a lot of it has to do with some of the quality control. You have the Tiguan, hasn't been selling all that well. Teos, 1.5-liter turbo 4-cylinder with the TSI engine, known for oil burning, turbo issues, wastegate, drivability, and even though they've upgraded and given you an automatic transmission this year, unfortunately, earlier generations meant that you had a dual clutch that had drivability problems. A lot of customers weren't necessarily loving the vehicle, so the sales and the reputation haven't been all that strong. But the bigger issue is Volkswagen going all in on this electrification. And here we have the ID Buzz. The ID Buzz is an expensive vehicle, pure electric, mediocre range, and unfortunately they haven't been selling all that well. They were trying to get way ahead of the program on the sales of these vehicles, but here, IQ Lite, look at the technology buried in there. Very expensive to service and repair. Unfortunately, not a lot of people are buying these vehicles. High incentives, pushes, trying to move these out the door, but they're not selling. And the ID4s are another example of a vehicle that just didn't sell all that well. They're heavily incentivized, and because it's an EV, and now the federal mandates are getting wiped out, both in Canada, US, you're starting to see those mandates and the incentives at $7,500 and beyond to move these down the road, means that that's gone. There's less incentive to buy them. Somehow they're going to offset that. But unfortunately, not a lot of people are catching on, and the fact is, without those incentives and the high base price of the sticker price of these vehicles, means that they're just not selling. So the combination of quality control issues, going all in on EVs, they've got their back up between the wall and a rock and a hard place, means Volkswagen's struggling to sell their products, and in order to remain competitive, they're going to have to try to work on their prices, and you're likely going to see that as we roll out in 2026. But in case you're looking for some amazing deals, there's a whole plethora of vehicles that are not selling. The dealers can't give them away. You're guaranteed to get yourself a massive deal. Check out those videos right there. I'm going to share that whole list with you. Hope to see each and every one of you real soon. See you then. Bye-bye.